Hi, Misha here, and waiting on UPS kind of day to end. This is not my SIG-Sauer P320 M17. I haven't disowned it. That's not that. Here is my M18. You've seen. I have this one at the store for a reason. I was out at the cabin time before last when the death of the airman happened on the M18. Was it July 20th? And a friend and customer of mine, he had picked this gun up, not from me, from a different shop, and he brought it over to trade. And I was talking with him, and he was saying, "Oh man, they're going off." And I said, "Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff on the YouTubes and internet, but there's also the kind of other side, the SIG defenders." Well, he was saying, I don't see those videos. Well, your feed kind of tailors that. He was convinced that this was just a danger, so he left it with me in the box. Okay, fine. He wanted me to sell it. I'm like, I don't know what I can do with it, but okay, sure. In fact, I'm bringing out another gun for him. We'll look at in a minute in the video. But then just a couple of days later, he got to digging in and saw what he thought were these conclusive videos where people were putting screws in the trigger, you know, the whole thing. And right there, that kind of made him second guess it. Now this guy, you've seen him in my videos before, he's served for over 20 years, so career military, government job after that, so 40 years of total U.S. service, so take that for what you will. But it goes to show you how things get moved around. And you know, me, myself, and I'm in a unique position. When it was reported that an M18 was just laying down, guy had taken his holster off and went to the crapper, and then it shot him. Everyone was so certain about that, I just kind of assumed there was a video. And you know, in 2025, most workplaces, most parking lots, parks have video cameras. You know, cops of course carry the body cams. I thought, well, there it is. It's on camera. Now, you know my situation. I can't see it. But people were talking so assuredly, you know, I assumed they saw video. Of course, 2 weeks later, I obviously realized there isn't a video out there. That changes things, because then you're getting into testimony, hearsay, and at the very least, if there was no video camera and the guy really was alone in the room and his gun really did go off, how would we know that? Because the gun's not talking, right? If his M18's talking, we got a bigger news story there than anything else. Now, I'm not trying to make light of his death. Regardless, it's tragic. And I'm going to say this too. Regardless of the outcome, SIG-Sauer's reputation is definitely damaged, yet to be seen if it's beyond repair. But however they handled it, it just did not appeal to a lot of people. And the jury's still out. It's one of those things that the internet hates. It's a mystery. It's not black and white. It's not a known thing yet. But I do have questions. And it seems like after the furor that came out on the 8th about the arrest being made, there's actually some strings being connected there and some lines being drawn. I think they're logical, but it's not as clear-cut as even it's been. It seems like for the last 3 or 4 days, things have calmed down, so I thought I would just kind of give my thoughts, again, while waiting on the delivery guys. So join with me, won't you? Because I'm going to share some questions I have and some thoughts I have, especially from my perspective and not being able to see, and questions about who's doing what where, and regardless, why did a young man lose his life in a non-combat zone? That's just extraordinary to me. So anyway, most of my videos are history videos. That's what I am, historian. I was a teacher. I don't like doing a lot of speculating, and I'm not much into modern news. But you guys like it, and I had the time, so let's dive in. If you'd like to help support, check out Patreon, do a super thanks, comment, definitely. Let's dive in. Regardless of anything else, yes, someone lost their lives. Why? Was it the fault of the pistol, i.e. the manufacturer? Was it the fault of the trials committee, the whole MHS program? Or was it the fault of the soldiers, the airmen? We have to consider all factors. Safety is on this gun. We do have a manual safety. Of course, we have all the inside stuff that's been talked about ad nauseum online to the point of absolute boredom. What we absolutely don't have is a dingus dongus on the trigger. That's the thing. This is a new style of pistol. Is it similar to a Glock? Absolutely. But where it matters, safety, in my opinion, is a very different type of gun than a Glock. But it's not the first time. This is the 21st century pistol. And every time a mass issue gun comes out, there are safety concerns. And unfortunately, very, very often, accidents. Take a journey in time with me to look at U.S. safety and handguns. The 1873 Colt, the single action army. Single action. What's to go wrong? Loading gate gun, right? Of course, there's no safety, but, hammer's uncocked. Well, not so fast. I bet most of you know where I'm going. There's a reason they left one cylinder empty. Because there's no real protection from that coming back and rebounding, at least on the originals. This does have the four-click. Early on, cowboys and cavalry alike learned keeping hammer over that was an issue. So there were safety concerns here with the most, basic and classic American gun. And next up, we move to double action revolvers with swing out cylinders. This is a Smith & Wesson. This is a 1917. We had the 1892, the 1909, very similar to this. Better, the hammer does rebound, but as we talked about in the earlier video on this subject, there's a reason Smith had to add an improved firing pin safety in World War II. So revolvers are not foolproof. Far from it. Now, training, familiarity, and common sense help a lot. And this is where a lot of militaries were at the dawn of the 20th century. They were very comfortable with revolvers. They knew how to work around them. They knew how to safe them, that kind of thing. But then automatics came in. So let's bring one out we haven't had in a video in a minute. My World War I era Colt here. Got a grip safety, thumb safety. But as I pointed out in the first video, there's no firing pin safety. Kind of like with the single action, if you've got one in the chamber, if that gets struck hard enough, especially on the big old spur hammer, it could detonate. Really good. On top of that, there was another issue. Ever think about why magazine disconnect safeties are so prominent? Well, for guys who were used to revolvers, they would take the mag out, not really thinking. It wasn't that they were stupid and thought it would actually empty the chamber. They were just not thinking, because humans are like that, especially when you're hot and tired or hungry. You think you take the magazine out, or clip, as they would probably call it, without a magazine disconnect safety. I don't know how many straight-up deaths there were, but I bet there were a lot of drawers turned brown. It was enough of an issue that Japan added it to their Type 14, and France mandated it when they did their trials for their new pistol. This is why the high power has it. And we've talked about some other issues here. So the 1911, as venerable as it is, well, it had safety concerns, and people were hurt, and probably some killed, although don't quote me on that, but I'm sure just over time with these. Now, the 1911 A1 served for a very long time. But eventually, we came to the next generation in the 80s with the Beretta M9 and 92 FFS. Trust me, there were major detractors, and a lot of people had issues. We've done deep dives into these, not going to do it here and now. As far as safety goes, this is better. There's a firing pin block. You have ambi decocker safety. No magazine disconnect, but, you know, training. You have a double action on the first pull, single, so you have a longer initial pull, unlike with the Colt, which is just short single action style. That helps a lot. However, there was at least one major safety thing I recall. Guys would sometimes accidentally toggle their safety on or off when holstering or pulling it out of the holster, or otherwise just knocking it. This is why a lot of guys don't like slide-mounted safeties. I've never had an issue with it, but I get it. So when your safety is not in the position you expect it to be in, that is absolutely an issue. And there were accidents with the M9, even though it's kind of the modern and much safer generation, drop safe for the most part than before. And up to this point, we at least have a manual safety. Here's my Glock 19X, nothing special here. But I remember when Glocks came out, Gen 1s. I was quite young, but yeah. There was a lot of hue and outcry about not having a manual safety, not having a hammer, just having this little dingus on the trigger. Now, of course, we know these have internal safeties. But first off, Generation 1, early on, especially the internal safeties, weren't quite as good as they would become later. Second, people didn't know or trust them like we have today. But this starts the new kind of late 20th and early 21st century polymer striker fire thing, and a whole different style of safety going on. But that dingus, it's never bothered me. But apparently it bugs some people, or they find that uncomfortable. I don't see how. But that's purportedly the reason that the P320 doesn't have it. And of course, a lot of the 320s we saw before the M17 did not have the safety. The military ones do. Now, there are some legitimate claims and concerns with some of the internal sear arrangements and not being small and mem parts. I'm not discounting that. But I do have one simple question. Has there been a documented case, and this is a serious question. Remember, I can't see videos. Has there been a documented case on video or a picture or something verified where the safety is clearly on, toggled on, and the pistol does something funky? I'm really curious the position of the safety on these guns, if they have them. Now, if they don't, without a dingus on there, and this is a new gun that my friend had. I think he shot it once. There's not much there. I can definitely see doing that because the trigger hangs out not quite to the edge, but yeah. So me, myself, and I would absolutely use that safety. Now, part of it is I'm familiar with 1911s. Very instinctual. I have another question, though. What's going on at our air bases? this isn't one of those kind of lawyer things where I think I'm right and I'm trying to make a point and be all smart. No, I'm legitimately asking questions because this is something I'm ignorant on. In the bases today, Air Force or the Global Strike Command specifically, first off, are officers and airmen just walking around with sidearms? Because there was a time when you were on a base stateside where typically, unless you were an MP or something like that, you wouldn't even have a sidearm with you. You know, they'd be nearby. But are they carrying them now all the time? Serious question. And if so, are they carrying them not just with a loaded magazine in the gun, but one in the chamber ready to go? If so, why? I know there could be an argument about terrorism or, you know, shooters and that kind of thing. But you would think in those situations, the risk of having all these people running around working hard with loaded guns, one in the pipe, in a building or similar environment, you think they'd at least, you know, carry it without one in the chamber. And if so, if they're carrying one in the chamber, they have to, fine. Are people using the safety on the M17, M18? If so, are these failures being reported with the safety? I asked that earlier, but I think it's a really important question. So please let me know in the comments, because these are the questions that came to mind, and I did talk to some friends that did serve, again, the one I mentioned earlier in the video and a couple others, and they said when they were in, that's not how things were done, but things change. And they might need to change back if that's kind of how things are going, because, you know, the way things work, you have multiple steps, multiple redundancies, so if something fails, for example, an M18 pistol, other procedures take up the slack. If these weren't being carried loaded around, this wouldn't have happened, sadly. So I'm kind of wondering why, again, stateside, this is how things are going on. But then I could be completely wrong. I don't know. That said, there is something else I've heard a bit that I can say categorically is wrong. Some criticize the P320 for having a fully cocked or, you know, virtually completely cocked, certainly more than a Glock striker, and that's just inherently wrong and shouldn't be doing. Bullshit. There have been tons of guns that way, including Walthers. Now, some versions of the P99 had it, but really the Poopy and today's PDP are good examples. This is a fully cocked, or I think they say 99%. So if you're going to quibble over a 1% deal, whatever, striker system. And by extension, the Turkish clones of these and others are that way too. They don't seem to be having issues. Now, granted, far fewer have been made compared with the 320. That said, the P99, and basically this is a, you know, Generation 3 P99, the PDP is a Gen 4, went into production in 1996, 1997. So just by virtue of time, you'd think we would have heard about it. And they're not the only fully cocked guns. Yeah, I hate to burst your bubble. Not everything's a Glock and Glock clone, guys. Not everything is this kind of spongy, half-done staple trigger. I actually don't mind it, but you know what I mean. There are different triggers out there. For example, here's my CZ P10F. Very nice trigger on this, but it does have the dingus. Yeah, I went for the F. I do like the full-size grip. Even though it's long, it's very slim. Fits me very well. One of these for a long time. And if you need more, here's my Springfield XD, the HS2000. Not only do you get a dingus, but you get a grip safety too for added everything instead of that. But it surprised you to learn that I actually don't own a ton of striker-fired polymer guns. I've had many over the years, but I kind of keep my favorites and sell the rest. And here's Beretta's offering. And this might have, next to maybe the PDP, maybe, one of the nicest combat style striker triggers out there. And it does have a dingus, but it goes very flush in there. It's a very wide trigger. Man, it's nice if you've never picked one up. And the APX here, A1 as it happens, but the APX was also in the MHS trials. Maybe it should have won. As you know, 3 guns essentially passed round 1. Of course, the 320, M17, and subsequent M18. Glock's version of this. Oh, one other little factoid that luckily is dying down now, but oh, Glock didn't win the MHS because they didn't have a manual safety. They damn well did. Now, they did kind of screw up on the commercial gun here by not including it, just to say, because they said this is the gun we submitted to the trials, and then they did that. But they absolutely have safety. So it made it to round 2, as it were. And yes, the Beretta APX. No, not the Beretta M9 A4. It didn't even exist to, what, 2021? Well past the MHS times. And even the M9 A3, yeah, Beretta had it ready to show at the end of 2014. Military, Army, not interested. It wasn't even in the trials. But, to Beretta's credit, they very quickly tooled up and did a version of the APX for the MHS. And considering everything else, you know, Beretta could have had some sour grapes. They didn't. I really like this pistol. Maybe it should have won. Maybe the Glock should have won. Maybe. And you know what? Maybe that's right. It's also entirely possible we could be sitting here in an alternative universe where the APX won, or the 19X won, and we still have a tragic death of an airman. Because we just don't know. That's the honest truth. We don't know yet. The story is still unfolding. You know, going back to the arrest of the other airman, we know he's been arrested for obstruction of justice, basically making a false statement, and involuntary manslaughter. They haven't released his name. They haven't even directly said it's connected to the death with the M18. Now, since it's the same base, we can very easily connect those dots. But you know what? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. I'm not jumping to any conclusions right now. I don't know. And as of doing this little talk out here, there has not been an official statement from the Air Force, which was, you know, Global Strike. Another piece of false info that was making the rounds. Mark Twain would have been happy. Well, not, but yeah, wouldn't be surprised. You know, oh, the Air Force, oh no, the whole military is retiring the M17. They're not using it. No, it was literally the Global Strike Command, and it seems like they did a complete check over their fleet in just a few weeks. And as far as I know, here in the middle of August, they have reinstated the M18s. But again, I could be wrong. Very well could be. So feel free to correct me. But I haven't heard that the inspection has turned up anything, just literally the smoking gun yet. We'll see. We don't know. If the problem is the SIG, then we might not be here if we'd gone with the APX. But we were also told that the guy took it off and it went off by itself on a table and shot him in the chest. And without video evidence, we're relying on testimony from, you know, his co-workers, and that is in question. I mean, I question the first-hand accounts from anyone, especially when they've got a lot to lose. I mean, we all have that little kid in us. I didn't do that, you know, we're not George Washington. We're not going to admit to chopping down that cherry tree, especially when it led to the death of a person, accidental or not. That is traumatic, and our instinct is to run away. I'm not shaming him. I'm understanding him, because we like to think we'd be the brave hero. The truth is, we're all pretty well cut from the same cloth. That leads me to another question that came out. Let's assume both airmen had an M18. They're obviously going to know which one discharged, which serial number belonged to it. If it was the other airman's, wouldn't that have raised flags? I mean, obviously the other airman's gun wouldn't have been sitting on this table alone. And if it were his own gun, why was someone else handling it? I have questions about the pistol in question. Which pistol, if any, which serial number did the deed? You said, I mean, I don't know. And let's just say SIG's innocent for a second. Hold off. We're about to flip that in just a minute after this, but let's just say they are. These are professional soldiers. 21 years old looks young to a lot of us now, but you're entrusted with very sensitive stuff. You know what guns are. Look, I did a recent video talking about my growing up, childhood, all that. We knew at 11, shoot, probably 5 years old, you don't horse around with guns. Why were they? Or him, whoever did it. Even if they had a loaded gun, even if there was one in the chamber. But again, I don't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was falling off the table and he went to grab it. I don't know. There are so many variables, so many things that could happen, but you'll tie yourself up in knots on the could-haves, what-ifs, and maybes. And even though it's not the answer that folks want, wait and see is the only honest one we can do from the outside as civilians. But a lot of folks aren't content with that. And I've seen it cut both ways. I've seen some say, this exonerates the M17, the M18. It's all bunk, a new thing. We'll see. Again, this story, it's certainly more complicated. It's not as clean cut as we were originally told. Fair enough. Completely agree with that. We don't know what's going to come out. It doesn't erase the other dozens or hundreds of reported incidents with SIGs. And that's logical. You know that. However, if we're being intellectually honest, it does show us the internet hive mind jumping to conclusions, and we have to approach others with some skepticism. It's not saying we don't believe it, but realize that things aren't always what we think and what's reported online. There you go. So even though the other cases are out there and absolutely need to be investigated, there was an incident, in 2022, and there's been things in the Marine Corps. There still very well could be a problem, even if this isn't one of them, and it kind of got picked up on. Conversely, I've seen the other side say, this is a conspiracy. Not in so many words, but there you go. Isn't it suspicious that right as things were coming down, the heat, so now they've engineered this SIG-Sauer and the Air Force, the government, to make it, it's a big... No, it's not. Have you met anyone in the government? I'm not going to say they're not that smart, but you cannot get a bureaucracy to agree. That's the problem with conspiracies. Trying to keep everyone to keep their lips shut and do their job and do it right and not bungle it up. Every time in history we see a conspiracy and it's more than one or two people, it gets bungled up. Check it out. It's just, I don't believe that either. I mean, is this fortuitous for SIG-Sauer? Hell yeah. Yeah, they got a bone. Just like a month ago, bad thing happened for their PR. It happens. There's ebbs and flows. You can't just say if something that supports your case comes through, it's God's gospel truth. And if something that seems to support the other case comes through, oh, throw it out, it's bunk. You have to judge evidence equally. As I said in our first video, I'm interested in the truth because all truth is I don't have a dog in this fight. I find it horrible that someone lost their lives. I want there to be justice there. But other than that, I don't have any love for SIG-Sauer. In fact, I rather don't like them. I gave my reasons and personal stories in the past couple of videos. Not going to reiterate. Yeah, I do like the original SIG from Switzerland. I even like West Germany's SIG-Sauer. And I like the early SIG imports. I even think the Mark 25 is a good gun. I think they improved it. But, yeah, I have reasons. And the way they've handled it, their level of kind of smugness and assurity. I get it. They're protecting their corporate image. I get it. But could they stop sounding like corporate bureaucrats for 5 fucking minutes and sound like real human beings that don't have a 9-volt battery in their ass? I think that's the problem. They don't seem real. It's too polished. It's too clean. It's too schmarmy. I don't know. You know what I mean? They're one of those companies that really gets you to love to hate them. And of course, them getting the contract for the M17 is a little weird. Honestly, that one doesn't bug me as much as the XM7 M7 contract. I think that's all kind of a whole hogwash. And I will freely admit my biases. I like HK okay. I'm a Walther fan. Always have been. And hey, they're right here in Arkansas, so a little home state pride. Why not? Well, at least, the import arm. And we've had awesome luck out of the P99s, the Poopy Qs, and now the PDPs. So, yeah, I will just throw that out there for what I feel. But there's nothing wrong with Glocks. I mean, I think a lot of the Cinema City stock, came when they didn't pick the Glock. Now, some say, well, they didn't complete the test. This is true. Others rebound saying, well, they didn't complete the test because Glock didn't meet the terms of the test. I'm not going to get into that today. But if this video has shown anything in recent events, there are two sides to every story, and you need to hear both. It doesn't mean you have to just immediately believe it or say you've been swayed over. I'm not. I still don't know what happened. But we will. We will find out. Even if SIG can show that the 320 is 100% safe, which I don't know. Even if the gun is, this trigger, especially if you don't have a safety, without the dingus and as light as it is and kind of spongy, man, that's sus. And then you throw in the MIM parts, and how many they've made so quickly. They've made 3, 4, 5 million. They're building in 10 years. That's a lot of pistols very quickly. And they're relatively cheap. I mean, all things considered, a new gun's $600, give or take. Well, now it's not. Now it's like $60. But normal times, they bring about $6. So, it's not the worst. But certainly not the best. That's okay, though. Military doesn't always choose the best. They choose the most economical. It is taxpayer money, after all. And that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning. I just don't know if SIG's reputation can rebound from this. Maybe I'm wrong. They definitely have their defenders. But man, have the lines been drawn in the sand now. And I don't know that many people are moving even to the questioning thing. They pick their side and that's it. And that's dangerous because it stops being about the truth and it's just being about I'm right and I'm going to prove it to you come hell or high water. I'm not saying I'm not guilty of that sometimes too, but I can tell you with full sincerity, I try not to be. When I catch myself doing that. What about yourself? Now, if you're in the Air Force, if you're part of the investigation and you have internal information, I'm not asking you to share it. You know things that the rest of us don't. But the truth is, most of us don't know jack. We read statements that have been filtered online and gone through things, have been simplified and chopped up and reassembled, and they've been turned into sound bits and bytes. How many out there that are just saying the P320 is the worst thing ever have even ever shot or owned one? Well, this one's relatively new to me. Yeah, my luck, I picked it up a few months before all this stuff happened, so I'm not going to sell it because I'm not going to pawn it off on someone else. But this one, I picked up when they went on sale soon after the 17s came out. Was I going to pay full price? Hell no. But they had a discount, a coupon, and it was like $400 after the thing. It's been a really good gun. That's all I can say. And there are a lot of really happy 320 owners out there. And I said this in the first video. When you produce millions of a gun, literally because of the laws of the universe, you are going to have a few hundred, maybe even a couple of thousand of lemons, of defects. It is horrendous when this happens and someone gets hurt or loses their lives. It happens all the time with airplanes, automobiles. Damn near happened to Boeing on the space station. Now, the difference is SIG's reaction is not what we would want to see. I think like Ford and stuff responded much better for the whole Pinto thing. We'll see. And, I'm recording this now. It'll go up in a day or two. Things could change. I guess all I'm saying is every time there's a new gun, there can be safety issues. And, pictures and it didn't happen. I mean, that's the truth. Unless there's a video showing something and a clear video. And I know there are some for the 320. I'm not saying there aren't. But in this instance, it seems like there were not. And that leads to questions. And questions are okay. It's when you start stretching for conclusions without that information, well, you see what happens. I hope the young gentleman who lost his life can find some peace. I hope it's done justice there. If there is a guilty party, obviously I want to see them, but I also don't want to see someone as a sacrificial lamb. I don't want to see them just throw it on a young man saying, well, it's all your fault, if it turns out that the 320 has a problem. So, yeah. And either way, no matter what, because of SIG's attitude, them getting all this hell is darkly hilarious. It couldn't have happened to a better company, And again, I'm speaking New Hampshire. Now, I know that the Luke and Ortmeyer group, which does also own SIG-Sauer in Switzerland, SIG-Sauer AG, they put out a statement supporting their sister company over here and did nothing wrong. That's again, lawyer speak. But there you have it. Anyway, if there's new information, new updates, please share them. I'm not really just parking myself on the news feeds for this. I check in every few days. But we're mostly just going to have to wait and see. In the meanwhile, check out some of my historical videos. There's a lot more interesting things than, kind of online gossip, in my opinion. But I have the time waiting on someone to arrive. You guys like it. Those are my thoughts. I'm probably wrong. Feel free to let me know. That's okay. I'm a big person. I can take here, and I'm wrong. But I do, either way, appreciate you tuning in, commenting, liking, sharing. If you support on Patreon, absolutely that, because it's very important right now. And, you can do a super thanks, or just comment, all that. With that, I'm going to get out of these mosquitoes, because they're eating me up around dusk. They come out real bad. This is Misha, and Peanut and I will see you back at the cabin very soon next time.